Hi, I'm Taun with Utah State University Extension and the KSL Greenhouse show. One of the most frequent questions I'm asked about in my office and on the show is how to eliminate or at least control field bindweed. And what I want to do over the next few minutes in this video is go over some options. Be aware that none of them are perfect, and we'll talk about both non-herbicide and herbicide options. And keep in mind that it will take sometimes several years to really get a handle on it, but we'll go ahead and talk about some options. The first situation I want to talk about is what to do with field bindweed in open areas. This is a somewhat abandoned kids' play area that used to be maintained better. The kids got old and nothing's been done with it, and the homeowners want to renovate it, but they've been concerned about the bindweed. Now, in these areas where I'm not really concerned about spraying because there aren't any desirable plants, your options are a little bit better on what to do. Now, I'm filming this in mid-September because right now is the best time to actually control field bindweed if you're using herbicides. And so in this fallow area right here where there's no desirable perennials, trees, or shrubs, what I personally would do is get a product containing glyphosate. This particular one is called Killzall, which is a Roundup knockoff that works fairly well, and you can get it from most independent garden centers. But what I do is mix it at the recommended rate and then mix it with another lawn weed killer. Now this one is called Q4 Plus, and it's also available mainly from independent garden centers, but it has a product in here. Besides being able to kill dandelions, it has a product called quinclorac, which is really effective against bindweed. And so I would also recommend this in the same mix at the recommended rate and apply both of them to this area. Now, because it's a little bit bigger area, you have the option of using a hose-end sprayer. Now, these can be a little tricky if you are spraying two products at once, and so you may need to spray one, let things dry and give it a day, and then spray the next one if you're going to use one of these. Now, you need to be careful because these can be wildly inaccurate in how they dose out the herbicide you put in them, and then that accuracy also comes into how you spray. And if you get it into your lawn a little bit, because it puts out a spray 5 or 6 feet wide, you may kill a 1 foot by 6 foot section of lawn accidentally. And so you do need to be careful with these, but they can be convenient if you know what you're doing. Now, another option would be one of these hose-end sprayers. I'm about to drop it. This one right here is an older one I have that I mainly use actually to use turf paint in, and I'll do demonstrations on greening up lawns with it. But this one is better if you have a border between a lawn and an open area, or for smaller areas, these are really nice. Now, just some reminders about using herbicides. Always follow the label, mix them at the correct rate, because dosing it up stronger oftentimes actually is negative. It negatively impacts how effective the spray is because it just scorches the top off the weed. Herbicides also will have safety recommendations on clothing. Oftentimes you need a long sleeve shirt and shoes that don't allow water to penetrate through them, sometimes safety glasses and rubber gloves. You cannot be too safe with these. And when you are done spraying, make sure that you're better off mixing half as much as you need and mixing twice than having a lot left over. I don't lightly recommend herbicides. Sometimes they're needed when it comes to field bindweed. They can be a powerful tool. Once you've sprayed these products, and you can do this again until from mid-September to mid-October, as long as the daytime temperatures are below 85 degrees, and even if you spray in the morning, if it's going to get hotter than 85 that day, I would give it until a day that it's just going to stay below 85. You're not going to get a 100% kill even when you're mixing these two together, but in the spring, if you've done your job, then you can probably expect anywhere from a 50 to 80% kill, so that it's more manageable and that you can control it in the future and have less problems. Another major area of the yard where bindweed can be problematic is the lawn. And this particular lawn here is not really bad, but it is around, and I don't know if the camera's changing and optimizing the picture, but as I look at this lawn, it's in decent shape. It's probably a little under-maintained. It could use some nitrogen fertilizer pretty soon, but it's doing a pretty good job at competing against the bindweed as compared to that open area we just talked about. Now in lawns, obviously the glyphosate products like the Kills-All and Roundup are not going to be an option because they'll kill the lawn too. So let's just leave these out for now. And what you're going to need is a lawn weed killer, a dandelion killer, so Weed Be Gone, this one, the Q4 that I already talked about. There are many of them out there, but it's also, as long as the temperatures are below 85, a great time to start using the lawn weed killer. And as I mentioned earlier, the quinclorac in some of these, so the Q4 Plus and there's others out there, are really good at knocking out bindweed if they're sprayed correctly, and you let the bindweed sit with that herbicide inside its roots all season long. Now you can use the same kind of applicators as you would in that open area. For lawn situations, I really like these, but that same caution goes that these can be really inaccurate. And so you want to do some test spraying by maybe putting a couple of ounces in and then just walking off an area to know how big it is, and then seeing if you're applying correctly. The hose-in sprayers are also, again, not too great for being accurate on where you're spraying. And so these sprayers like this one are much better because you can do smaller areas. Now I'll sometimes see people trying to spray their entire yard with one of these, and you lose where you've sprayed. Because if it's a big yard, it's easy to miss areas because it's only putting out about a 2 to 3 foot wide spray at best. Oftentimes, if you don't know what you're doing, it is just, you apply too much or too little. And so when you're using either the hose-in sprayer or this tank sprayer right here, you want to apply so that everything is wet to the point like you just spray painted, so it's wet but not dripping everywhere. Now if you look at your labels on most homeowner grade lawn weed killers, the wait time for pets or kids to come out on the lawn is once it is dried. If you're concerned about it, you can spray in the evening and send the kids to school and give it about a 24-hour period, but the label will state that you need to wait until the lawn is dry. So I want to talk about some special situations to where I just won't spray. You can see I'm standing against a fence that has grapes on it, and grapes are extremely sensitive to lawn weed killer. So the Weed Be Gone, that Q4 Plus, no matter which one, the 2,4-D and dicamba are really tough on them. And so I'll move for a little bit, but you can see this white stuff right here is bindweed that has powdery mildew that's climbed up in the fence. And in this situation, what I personally would do is just do my best to yank it out maybe once a month, but you can see that these grapes are doing a pretty good job at out-competing it. And as the grapes shade the fence, there will be less of it except for at the base. Behind here also, it's a little harder to see, is somebody's garden. And when I'm spraying my lawn or other areas, and if somebody's garden is adjacent to where I'm spraying, that's kind of a no-no too. You know, you've got to be super careful because especially those 2,4-D products, the lawn weed killers that I've mentioned, will volatilize and turn into a gas, and they would go right through the fence. And over here I've got some corn, but there's tomatoes and squash and pumpkins in the garden too that would be impacted, and you would be liable for it, and you'd probably feel horrible. And so in this situation, you know, even along the ground, there hasn't been a lot of weed control done as far as spraying because of the sensitivity of the grapes to those lawn weed killers. And so they just tolerate some more weeds through here and maybe come through once in a while and just yank the bindweed out of the fence. This isn't an ideal place to be growing grapes for food production, but it works and it does offer an effective privacy screen. So again, in garden situations, if you're actively growing a garden or the neighbors are, if you're growing fruit crops and things like that, you've got to be super careful. Now, once these folks on the other side of the fence are done gardening, what I would recommend doing is just removing all of the old plants and either composting them or throwing them away if they were diseased, and leave the bindweed alone, because once you have it out, you're done gardening and have everything out, you're free to go ahead and use a glyphosate product like the Kills-All or Roundup and mix it with 2,4-D or even a lawn weed killer. You need to look at your label to see how long you need to wait before you can plant there again. It's usually a few weeks to a few months, but check your label on that. But get done gardening first, then go ahead and spray. So thank you again. My name's Taun. I work for USU Extension and co-host the KSL Greenhouse show with Maria Chaleos. The show runs from 8 to 11 on Saturday mornings on KSL 1160 and 102.7. Follow us on Facebook at the KSL Greenhouse. USU Extension, you can follow on Facebook at searching Utah Gardening Experts on Facebook, and that's an extension page. And then I also host a podcast called Homegrown Horticulture, where I try to cover weekly relevant gardening topics, and you can find that on Apple or any other podcast aggregator at Homegrown Horticulture. So thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.